end of the Hill.
Thank you. Devin?
Hi, everyone. I'm Devin Kramer. I'm the acting Dean of Students at CU Boulder and, in general, the Assistant Dean of Students.
Kim?
Hi, everybody. Kim Calamino. I am Director of Local Government and Community Relations at CU.
Thanks, Kim. Commander Yamaguchi?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Terry Yamaguchi. I'm a commander, and I currently oversee the swing shift or our evening shift. And I'm also here representing our graveyard shift and our impact team.
Thank you. Deputy Chief?
Good evening. My name is Kerry Weinheimer. I'm Deputy Chief of Operations at the Police Department.
Thank you. Chief Jokerst?
Hi, thank you. My name is Doreen Jokerst, and I'm the Chief of Police here at CU.
And Chief Harold?
Good evening, Brenda. Thank you for being here. Good evening, everybody. Maris Harold, Police Chief of Boulder.
Jeff?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Morris. I'm the Director for Off-Campus Housing and Neighborhood Relations at CU.
Sandra?
Good evening, everyone. Sandra Yanis, Deputy City Attorney, and I supervise the prosecutors in municipal court, the city prosecutors.
Great. Stephanie?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Baldwin, and I oversee the university recognized fraternities and sororities at CU.
Thank you. Philip?
I'm Philip Volpe. I am an assistant city attorney and one of the city prosecutors.
Thank you. Lisa?
Good evening. I'm Lisa Nelson. I'm a resident of the Hill, and I'm here representing the University Hill Neighborhood Association.
And Chris?
Good evening. I'm Chris Meschuk. I'm serving as the interim city manager for the city of Boulder.
Thank you. Angela?
Hi, everyone. I'm Angela Cimental. I am acting communication manager for Boulder County Public Health.
Thank you. Lane?
Good evening, Lane Drager, Boulder County Public Health, and I'm the COVID partner liaison.
Great. And Dion?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dion Hua. I'm the Public Information Officer for Boulder Police and Fire Departments.
And Mark?
Good evening. My name is Mark Wallach. I'm a member of the Boulder City Council.
And Rachel?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Rachel Friend. I'm also a member of Boulder City Council, and I am the Council Liaison to the Hill Revitalization Working Group. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, again, for extending what has been a very long day for those of you for whom this is a work day, in order to be here to provide information and answer questions for residents of the University Hill neighborhood. It looks like we have about 100 people on the call with us tonight. So that's a great turnout and a good opportunity to really hear what's on people's minds. So let me just go through a little bit how this will work tonight. We'll have a brief update from several of our panelists. Several folks are on here just to be available for your questions, but we will be getting some updates from a few of them. And then we will have questions that were submitted by the University Hill Neighborhood Association earlier today. And thank you to Callie Wyant for collecting those questions for us. We'll also take questions from the Q&A box. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see an icon that looks like two little thought bubbles, and that's our Q&A function for this meeting. So we invite you to type your questions into the Q&A box, and as we go through the evening, we will answer as many as we can in the time we have this evening. Everyone on the call tonight has committed to being here until 7, and so we will get through as much as we can in our time together. So if you are joining us by phone, I don't know that we have anyone joining us on the phone tonight. It doesn't look like it. Oh, no, it does look like it. We have quite a few people joining us on the phone. Thank you for being here. We're glad you're here. So if you've joined us by phone tonight and you have a question, you can press *9 to raise your hand when that time comes, and we'll be able to unmute you, to call your name and unmute you to ask your question since you are unable to use the Q&A box. If you are not on the phone, we do ask that you use that Q&A box. What we find with these briefings is a lot of times people have the same question, and so that helps us go through and make sure that we're not doubling up. All right, so I think we're getting ready. I do just want to acknowledge that it's been an extremely emotional weekend for everyone involved. And especially for those of you who live on the Hill and have joined us on the call this evening to get information. We know that you're frustrated and we know that emotions are running high. We encourage a productive tone for this conversation and a collaborative and constructive tone for your questions. And we know and appreciate that you've been through a lot. So thank you for all of those things. So moving forward, I would like to start tonight with our city council members providing us with some opening remarks. I'm going to start with Mark Wallach, please.
Thank you, Brenda. It was a disaster of a day, and it's a disaster for Boulder. The fact that we made the national news in this kind of negative way is not something you ever want to see. What happened, and I was there with Rachel on the morning after, is way beyond normal college student behavior. All of us can remember our college years, and I'm sure each one of us did things that we are grateful that they've never appeared on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. So we've all done stupid things, but this was a bridge too far. This was way beyond the pale. Throwing rocks at first responders, damaging their equipment, damaging cars. That is just not something that is really tolerable. I think moving forward, we need to do two things. One is we need to have a vigorous enforcement against people who committed these criminal activities. And second, we need to start to address the conditions on the Hill and find a way forward that makes the Hill a more welcoming place for people to live other than students, preserves its quality as a neighborhood, and gives people a greater degree of security of mind if they're going to live there. And I hope we can address all that. And before I stop, I also want to thank my colleague Rachel for inviting me to this meeting. I am here at her suggestion, and I'm very grateful that she did so. So thanks, Rachel, and you're up.
I'll take that as my invitation, Brenda. Thanks, Mark, and thanks for joining and being willing to be here, and for coming out Sunday morning as well to see what it is like for people who are living on the Hill. So again, I'm Rachel Friend, a member of Boulder City Council, and on behalf of the city, I want to directly apologize for the riots on Saturday, which were egregious and offensive and an embarrassment for the city. And I'm sorry for everyone's suffering. I'm here tonight to listen and learn and to answer questions if I can. My focus going forward will be on how to prevent things like this from happening again, but also to hopefully generate some momentum for getting some changes that are overdue and needed on the Hill that can be implemented to help improve the day-to-day quality of life for community members, all community members who are living on the Hill. So I just want to thank you all for being here and taking the time. And this is probably for some of us a tough space to step into. So I look forward to a productive dialogue and hopefully some changes coming up. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. I'd like to start with our representative from the University Hill Neighborhood Association. Lisa Nelson has been a great partner in conversations about quality of life on the Hill for many, many years. And we appreciate you being here tonight, Lisa, to share a statement from the University Hill Neighborhood Association.
Thank you, Brenda. Yeah, I know a lot of the folks on this panel. Many of you know I have lived at 10th and College for the last 30 years. The last riot actually also happened here in 2004, right in front of my house then as well. It's hard to believe that I've been through this twice. I just want to apologize. It's been a long couple of days and I'm feeling it right now. I want to thank Rachel and Mark for being here tonight and also for coming yesterday morning to clean up and show their support and hear from the community. And I also want to thank the students who came to help, as well as the CU faculty and staff who just came out of the goodness of their hearts because they wanted to help clean up. So I wanted to thank all those people. I'm here right now to read a statement from the University Hill Neighborhood Association regarding the events of March 6th. 2 council members, staff, CU administrators, CUSG, and the Hill Revitalization Working Group members and the community on this call. We would like to thank everyone for holding this meeting to review the events of March 6th, to understand what happened and why, and to ensure that this never happens again. Many neighbors have lived on the Hill since the first riots 20 years ago. At that time, it seemed unfathomable that something so destructive could happen. Many neighbors have worked tirelessly since then to ensure it would not happen again. And yet on Saturday night, there was a virtual repeat of the wanton destruction and callous behavior of hundreds of drunk students, endangering police officers and bystanders, destroying property, and putting the public at risk during a pandemic. This selfish behavior came nearly 1 year after the large St. Patrick's Day parties on the Hill that happened at the beginning of the pandemic lockdown. UNA has worked closely with the city, CU, property managers, landlords, and stakeholders over the years, and we are grateful for the continued support and engagement of so many. With the steady creep of investor-owned houses in our neighborhood, we have repeatedly called for the support of the city and CU to ensure ordinances are observed and residents are afforded the right to the quiet enjoyment of their home, both student and long-term residents, without fireworks jolting us awake in the middle of the night or amplified music blasting all day and night. Particularly concerning is the behavior of students during this pandemic. The lack of social distancing, the failure to abide by gathering size requirements, and the failure to wear masks. The drunken melee or riot, and let's be clear, this was more than just a disturbance, on Saturday unfortunately capped a snowball effect of many failures of the entire system. After hearing Chief Harold in the news conference yesterday, we believe that the Boulder Police response was appropriate once the riot turned violent and the mob grew so large. As a result, we are not talking today about dead or seriously injured students or police officers. We are rightfully angry that the culprits are still out there, and we believe the police department's restraint and pulling back once they were attacked probably saved lives. As we have repeatedly discussed and requested for years, the city must have enforceable ordinances that apply to both students and landlords that are consistently and vigorously enforced. This must happen without placing the majority of the burden of enforcement on the residents themselves, which creates a toxic dynamic in the community and places neighbors at risk for retaliation. The police must issue actual tickets instead of an infinite number of warnings that the city attorney's office can and will prosecute and that the municipal court will uphold. While we support restorative justice and other educational interventions for students who qualify for and deserve that opportunity, there must also be more significant consequences, including an up to expulsion for the worst offenders if the educational interventions fail. We look forward to continuing to work together to improve the Hill, and we hope during this meeting to get some clarity as to the why this happened and perhaps think about solutions so that this never happens again. Thanks everyone for your time. Respectfully, Lisa Nelson on behalf of the University Hill Neighborhood Association.
Thank you, Lisa. Anything further before we move forward? Okay. Thank you again for being here. I know that is a lot of voices that you are carrying with your voice, and we really appreciate that. We are getting some questions for clarification. Unfortunately, because we knew that the turnout would be large tonight, and we knew that time would be limited, we have not set this up as an opportunity for everyone to be able to speak out loud, and are instead using the Q&A box tonight. So we do invite you to engage that way. We know that it is not as satisfying as being able to use your own voice in this type of situation. And we encourage you to utilize open comment at City Council, as well as emails to the City Manager and City Council to be heard in other ways, and also the Q&A box, which we will be reading aloud on your behalf tonight. So moving into our updates, we're first going to turn to Chief Harold from the Boulder Police Department, and I know she has a number of her officers with her to provide an update on this response from the City of Boulder Police Department.
Thanks, Brenda. I just wanted to provide, first of all, Lisa's response is accurate and her statement is accurate, and I appreciate that. And I feel so horribly upset over this incident and what Lisa has been going through since I came to Boulder. So I support that statement wholeheartedly. As you can imagine, at this point, Boulder Police Department is reviewing over 600 videos of the incident that started from anywhere in the early afternoon hours all the way until 10 o'clock at night on Saturday. We have been assigned investigative assistance from DA Doherty's office, which is a big help because it helps us establish legal sanctions quickly. We've also received help from CU's police department as well. They've assigned an investigator to review tape. This is ongoing. We've already identified several suspects in the property damage, and we are sifting through video as quickly as possible, and that task force will work around the clock until we identify as many people as possible, working with the DA's office. So that is the work, the primary work this police department is doing, focusing in on property damage as well as actions of violence toward first responders, towards the police department, and toward the fire department and some other business people that were in the area at the same time. So for the next several days, we'll be reviewing video, working closely with the DA's office, and culminating with arrest and further criminal investigations. In addition, we're also planning for the next several days high visibility in the Hill area and writing citations when deserved and working with other agencies as we proceed for the next few days on this. Thanks, Brenda.
Thank you, Chief. And we'll turn to your partner in these efforts, Chief Doreen Yokerst of the CU Police Department.
Thank you, Brenda, and thank you so much for having me here. I just want to reiterate what Chief Harold said on behalf of the university, our police department. Lisa, we apologize for what transpired and what everyone is going through. We are here to support our community and community constituents as we move forward on this. We are collaboratively and in partnership, as Chief Harold said, working with the Boulder Police Department, reviewing countless hours of videos and tips coming in. I want to thank our community members that are sending in those tips and encourage them to keep those coming forward. We greatly appreciated it. Thank you again. Our update really is the same as Chief Harold. We will be increasing our patrols, not only at the university, but in the Hill as well. We will be doing that for the upcoming weekend and the upcoming St. Patrick's Day as well. Thank you very much, Brenda, again for having us. And I'm here to answer any questions that may come forward as well.
Great, thank you, Chief. At this rate, we'll have a lot of time for questions, so that's great. Thank you so much. Next, we'll turn to Devin Kramer. Devin is with CU Student Affairs and will provide an update on the student conduct response.
Yes, thanks everyone for having me. And I apologize, my daughter is in the background, so if she, so first and foremost, I want to share that I'm very disappointed about the incident that occurred on the Hill. What we saw Saturday night is a subset of our students who don't believe they are accountable for their own safety and that of our community. And that's unacceptable at any time, but particularly during a pandemic. Some of our students engaged in acts of violence towards law enforcement and other officials who responded to the area. This is an affront to our community, or our campus and our community. Those who demonstrate through their conduct that they cannot meet our expectations are not welcome at CU Boulder. I want to share some important information from the fall semester to give you context of the work we've done thus far. Of the 45 students suspended last semester for violating public health orders, 30 of them were for hosting nuisance parties on the Hill. As we look to the incident from March 6th, I want to assure you that any student who either joined in the gathering in clear violation of current health orders or who refused to disperse when asked by law enforcement that we're able to identify is subject to disciplinary action through the university. Any student found responsible for having engaged in acts of violence towards police officers or other egregious acts connected to the events of March 6th, including damage to property, will face serious sanctions, with the most significant violations potentially resulting in expulsion from the university, which means that they cannot return at any point in the future. They also may face criminal and civil sanctions from the city and the county. We want to be open and transparent about how the university is adjudicating students associated with this event. We will provide as much information as we can within the scope of the law for this individual event. We'll continue to provide updates on our dashboard about how we're responding to all violations of public health orders, and to the extent possible, we're going to differentiate what is and is not related to this event. I want to emphasize what has already been said. Anyone with information to assist in this investigation now taking place can submit leads to Boulder Police Department. Conduct processes in situations like this are most effective when they're based in reports from CUPD and Boulder Police. We encourage anyone with information to report to the Boulder Police Department first. Police will then refer cases to CU Boulder as their investigation unfolds, and at that point, we'll initiate our investigations and hold students accountable when the evidence leads to a responsible finding. The other thing I wanted to add is, in supporting our community, we're going to be expanding our testing services to the entire Hill community. We're going to be offering mobile testing for CU affiliates, which was launched today, and that's something we've been doing through the semester, and we'll be at Pleasant Street for the rest of this week. For the week of March 15th and ongoing, it will be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday on Pleasant Street, and Athens North on Thursday and Friday. For non-affiliates, we're going to offer monitoring testing through the mobile site only from Wednesday, March 10th through Friday, March 19th on the schedule I provided above. So for those non-affiliates, if you would like to participate in our testing, you can go to one of those mobile sites. Space is limited. We only have the capacity for 375 tests per day.
Great, thank you, Devin. And I do see we have quite a few questions that I'm sure will be in your area on the list. So we'll come back to you when we come to our question time. Next, we'll hear from Amalia Fromelt from CU Student Government.
Thank you, Brenda. First, I just want to share a statement that we released to our own campus community, and then just a few updates after that. We are deeply disturbed and disappointed in the events that took place on Saturday on the Hill. The prolonged gathering that took place on the 1100 block of 10th Street, lasting the duration of the day and into the night, is in no way excusable. As the student body president of the University of Colorado Boulder, we absolutely condemn the violent, irresponsible, and immature behavior that students recklessly partook in. Furthermore, we support the university's decision that anyone who was found responsible for engagement in acts of violence or other egregious acts connected to the events, including damage to property and not dispersing when ordered by police, will face serious sanctions up to expulsion from CU Boulder without the possibility of readmission, and may also face criminal and civil sanctions from the city and county. To the students who participated in the events on Saturday, you should be ashamed of yourselves. You have embarrassed this university. You have embarrassed your peers. You have destroyed a beloved residential and historical area of our community, and you have jeopardized the safety and health of your neighbors and community at large. The violence and lack of compliance that occurred was problematic in itself and will result in punishment. But your additional choice to engage in this type of egregious behavior amidst an ongoing pandemic that has taken over 6,000 lives of those within the state of Colorado alone is disturbing. Furthermore, if you choose to continue this type of behavior, or if you have been inspired by the events of Saturday night, you will be met with equal punishment and sanctions. As students ourselves, we are additionally concerned and disappointed with the inaction that took place in the hours leading up to the riots. These riots did not occur suddenly, but they were a result of a day's worth of minimal enforcement on the block, allowing the group to grow as large as it did. This is a part of a larger concerning trend that we have noted among the Hill, being a lack of enforcement or intervention of large-scale gatherings that clearly break the ordinances and restrictions that have been placed on the city of Boulder. We call upon the Boulder Police Department and the University of Colorado Police Department to engage in more effective intervention practices that hold students who choose to engage in this behavior more accountable. This past year has been marked with tragedy, isolation, and sorrow. We are deeply saddened to see our own peers willingly choose to continuously engage in behavior that will undoubtedly place a larger strain on our community. You have embarrassed this institution and community to the highest degree and have chosen to put the lives of your own neighbors at risk. To reiterate, we fully support the university's decision to pursue punishment for those who were involved moving forward. We will continue to work with the university, City of Boulder, and Boulder County Public Health to address this issue. We expect from students an immediate stop to this behavior and compliance in this process. Before we continue tonight, I would also like to add that as student leaders, we have the ability to express the concerns of students, to work with campus leadership to implement policy, and to assist in communication with students. As student leaders, we do not have the ability to control the behavior of other students. The students who partook in the events on Saturday are deserving of and will be met with appropriate punishment, and we support the university in this decision. But I would like to make it outstandingly clear that the actions of those students are not representative of our student body at large, and we commend those students who made the active decision to not participate in the riots. We value our relationship with the Hill and the community at large, and will continue to work towards strengthening these relationships. I would like to additionally note that the current steps being taken towards addressing the events on Saturday should and will be taken, but cannot be sustained as a long-term solution for addressing student behavior on the Hill. We would like to see an increase in support from the city, not just police resources, but community resources, and an increase in accountability and landlord-tenant relationships. I'm shocked, saddened, and terrified at what has happened this past weekend. And as president, I would like to make it very clear that not only am I offering my deepest apologies on behalf of the student body, but additionally, I'm committed, along with my fellow executives, to engaging in legitimate work and solution rendering processes moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. And again, we always appreciate your voice on behalf of students whenever we come together around these types of issues. I appreciate your being here. I want to answer now a point of clarification on the format that we're in Zoom. Just so you all are aware, so everyone you met at the beginning of the call is still on the call with us now. We do have them turn off their cameras unless they're answering a question, just so that it's easier to focus on the folks who are speaking, but they are here. In the Zoom webinar format, you can only see folks who have their cameras on. So our CU officials who joined us at the top of the call are still here and will be able to take your questions when that time comes. All right, and so next we are going to, I closed my agenda. Next, we are going to finish out with Kate Haywood from Boulder County Public Health. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you, Brenda. Public health echoes the sentiments of my fellow panelists that the events this weekend were disturbing, and public health supports the community-wide efforts to bring those responsible accountable. As we have throughout the pandemic, public health is working with our partners at the city, BPD, and CU to identify and take appropriate enforcement action. For properties that hosted gatherings in violation of public health orders, public health will send notices of violation to property owners, managers, and to the extent possible, tenants and guarantors, putting them on notice that the property is or is at risk of being designated a public nuisance and source of communicable diseases under our statutory authority, which could result in public health taking legal action against the property owner to abate the nuisance at their property. Since fall 2020, 40 properties have received notices from public health and 7 properties have been designated as public nuisances. No violations have occurred at these properties since those designations were made. As properties that hosted parties are identified through the ongoing investigations, public health will follow up with appropriate enforcement action.
Thank you, Kate. All right, I'm going to turn first to questions that were submitted through the University Hill listserv throughout the day. So I'm going to start with a question for both of our police chiefs and their teams, which is, why did the police not act to break up the large gathering in the afternoon instead of waiting into the evening to ask? I know this has been a point that neighbors are working to understand the timeline of how events happened. So it would be great if we could hear an accounting of how it rolled out on Saturday.
Yeah, sure. And so let's walk through the whole day. A little bit after 1 p.m., Boulder Police Department received some public health order calls for service that were probably 3 to 4 blocks away from where the main incident happened at College and 10th Street in Pennsylvania, that area. We dispatched our code enforcement officers, which we routinely do on public health calls where we're receiving reports that students aren't wearing masks. And so code enforcement responded to those initial calls in the early afternoon and talked to community members, asking them for compliance, which is our first step. From everything that I'm looking at through our computer-aided dispatch report, responding officers said the community members were cordial and cooperative and agreed to comply with the mask order and comply with the noise order. Our first call for service for a party or loud noise was in the 800 block of 12th Street, which again is several blocks away from where this major incident happened. And we received a couple more public health violation orders. At the same time, we received a noise complaint that triggered a rapid response team to the area of 1140 10th Street, where we had numerous students jumping on Amazon trucks and trying to ride the Amazon trucks in the area. We sent a rapid response team into that area that culminated with the students running from the police, and one of the students running right at the police. He was apprehended and taken out of the area and issued a citation for his part in that. The next major noise complaint that we had was further down the street at 1547 9th Street. Again, officers responded on that. We do not get calls about numerous hundreds of people until 1550 hours, and we got a report that at 1114 10th Street, large party in the street, several patrol units dispatched, summons is issued. At that point, that triggered a recall of our impact team, and our impact team responded to the area, noticing that we had large crowds, began an active dialogue with influencer, which is considered a best practice in crowd management and crowd control. The impact team knows numerous students and has really good impact in the area of University Hill. These are the people that know the community partners and community members and students. That group tried to get the influencers to try to disperse these large crowds to limited effect. At that point, the impact team supervisor, Tom Dowd, requested that nighttime commander respond in, which we did. Commander Walker responded in to assess the situation. And at that point, he ordered a SWAT call up, which culminated in not only our services, but county resources as well. So it probably took anywhere from 50 minutes to 90 minutes to get a full activation of SWAT to the area, fully equipped with their armored vehicles and all of their police officers equipped with tactical gear. Let's see. At 1700 hours, a command post was placed at Flatirons Elementary. At 1726 hours, SWAT began responding to the scene. I'm sorry, at 1748 hours, SWAT commander notified, SWAT page initiated, And from there on, obviously, command staff responded to the scene, including myself, and they put numerous tactics to try to disperse the crowd, which culminated in, unfortunately, 3 officers being hit with blunt objects, most likely rocks from our investigation thus far. And so a complete SWAT response and county response, including the State Patrol and other local agencies responding in to assist. And I can go more into the tactics, or I have our assistant SWAT commander that can give us details about the SWAT call up and how we responded to disperse the crowd eventually. But I can tell you that we had police officers in and around the area, including undercover units. And unfortunately, dispersing large crowds of intoxicated students not only is challenging, but very dangerous. And so we are walking a tightrope to disperse them without using force. And I can tell you that, unfortunately, it did culminate with a SWAT presence that we had to disperse by using multiple tactics. But crowd management and crowd control with large groups of students that have been drinking is very challenging. And I can tell you that I'm very proud of the restraint the Boulder Police Department used, because the last thing you want to do is use force against students for these lower level violations that precipitated this in the early afternoon. Hope that's helpful, Brenda.
It is. Thank you, Chief. How are the officers who were injured doing today?
They're all good. We're just lucky that they had equipment on that protected their facial area, their back, and their hand. I had one of our SWAT officers hit in the face with a large rock, and if he wouldn't have had a tactical gas mask on, probably suffered serious injuries. I had another officer struck in the back by a large rock, again, because of his tactical vest and his, we call them turtle suits. He didn't suffer serious injuries, but it was enough to push him forward, obviously. And then we had another officer hit with a blunt object in the hand. So all minor injuries, and I feel really lucky that we didn't have more injuries of officers and fire personnel in the area, as well as innocent community members that were, witnessing this unbelievable act of violence. But thank you for asking, Brenda.
Yeah, thank you. Chief Jokers, do you have anything to add to what Chief Harold shared?
Just that both our police departments were in communication as this started to unfold. Chief Harold and I were in communication and discussed sending out the CU alert that went out. It goes out to over 50,000 community constituents. And so that way that we can try and communicate with people best we can to stay out of the area when this violence was occurring.
Thank you. Sort of a more general question for either or both of you. Does law enforcement in general, in a situation that is not this heated or this escalated, do you in general have the authority to disperse COVID crowd violations? And what do those protocols look like under normal circumstances if you do?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brendan. Obviously, we take it seriously. What we are seeing, and I have Commander Yamaguchi here and Deputy Chief Weinheimer, who boots on the ground of a lot of these issues. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is escalating behavior of the students where when the police arrive, they are running inside of residences and they are locking the door and they're not answering the door, which puts the police in a very bad situation of either trying to investigate it to the best of their ability and working with the city legal team to go after nuisance-based abatement, or work with the county public health, which I think we've done a really good job. And but it escalates the situation to where the only other option the police have is to gain a search warrant. And can you imagine getting search warrants on these type of situations of using force to get into a house or property, and then coming in contact with multiple students, maybe even 50 students inside of a residence. So it puts the police in such a horrible situation. And we're seeing this behavior escalate. And Commander Yamaguchi has been on the front of this situation. And as I was here last time, I'm almost willing to give this consideration about getting search warrants, but it would not be it would not be a very thoughtful response. I think that the likelihood of using force against students is high, but I have to agree that we have to start, you know, looking at landlords. We have to start looking at this holistically, because again, the police, especially in a pandemic time right now, have very limited enforcement options. I mean, we are down to visibility and trying to convince people to comply with the law. And, you know, we're writing warnings and citations trying to get compliance, but the behavior of the students is escalating to the point where, you know, I am talking to my team and the legal team at the city. Is it in our best interest to have some search warrants made up? I got to tell you, this wouldn't be a best practice, but this is the conduct of the students, and they're getting smart, and they know that all they have to do is shut that door, which puts us in trying to get a search warrant, which I don't know how many judges would sign off on that. We have a legal team here today, but that's what's going on. And this is what happens when the police arrive on some of these calls for service. And then it's developing probable cause to get a search warrant, and then asking yourself, are you willing to use force once you push the door in? Are you willing to use force? I would like to think that the answer is no on that.
Thank you. Anything to add, Commander?
The only thing I would add is that even though the doors get slammed in our face, we have been successful in following up. Unfortunately, it's at a later time for those being disturbed by the behavior of the occupants. But we have had success following up at a later date and holding those who were responsible for having that gathering accountable for their actions. And I also just want to point out that we have received good support from property managers and or landlords on the Hill when we seek information about who resides in some of these problem residences.
Thank you for that. And Deputy Chief, I see your camera came on. Would you like to add something as well?
Yeah, Brenna, I just wanted to add, and I may have taken a slightly different interpretation of that question about using tactics to disperse crowds that are violating public health orders. If a crowd is merely gathered and the violation is they're exceeding the limit or they're not wearing masks, we couldn't justify using the type of force we used to dispel a riot for that type of a crowd. And I kind of took that spin from that question that the person may be asking about large gatherings outdoors, and we can't use that type of force when it's a mere violation of a public health order. That wouldn't be proportional to the violation. So I wanted to add that.
Great, thank you. Kate, can you remind us what the current public health order is for gatherings under level yellow, where we find ourselves now?
Yes, personal and social gatherings are limited to up to 10 people from no more than 2 households.
And as I recall, in a group home, like many of these homes on the Hill involve many roommates living in one building. Household, remind us how household is defined.
Yes, absolutely. As stated on Public Health's website, a household in congregate housing settings refers to a single room. So in a residence hall, for example, the whole residence hall building would not be your household. It would just be you and your roommate or roommates in your room.
Great, thank you. Chief Jokerst, with the, and I believe this is already happening, but I have a question, so I'd love to hear more about this. Would the university consider using your own police force on the Hill for code enforcement and gathering type issues?
So currently CUPD and the Boulder Police Department work very effectively together. We have members together that are on a joint SWAT team. Our members are also in other roles within the Boulder Police Department. As far as a Hill team response, we do go up there and actively patrol the area and try to support Boulder Police Department when we can in different levels of enforcement. Specific to code enforcement, that would be something I would discuss with the police department to see those roles, as they do have code compliance officers through the city in regards to that. But we definitely work in partnership and in collaboration with the Boulder Police Department when it comes to enforcement measures on the Hill.
Great, thank you. And I think this is a question for you while I have you with your microphone live. So there's a question about something that happened in the middle of the incident, which was that students received an email from the university alert system instructing them to run hide and fight, which was a mistaken message. But maybe you could talk a little bit about how that happened and what that type of process looks like.
Sure, and thank you very much, Brenda, for that question. I'd first like to apologize that the heading in that did not get removed. When the police department and the university sends out an alert, it's just that, it's an emergency alert, which means we have templates put together, and sometimes those templates don't get corrected when the communications methods get sent forward. That communication method gets sent via text message, via email, and as the message was being put together, it was a pre-existing one for a test page. And I know that it caused a lot of alarm and scare within our community. And so I apologize for that. It was complete human error and an oversight on our police department. And we'll make sure that it is corrected. But it is emergency alert system, an emergency messaging system. And again, it goes over to over 50,000 people when that goes out. And it definitely is something that will be looked into, and we'll be issuing a public apology on that, because I know it did cause a lot of concern for our community, and I apologize for that.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarifications around that. I'm sure we'll come back to you soon, Chiefs, but I am going to turn to some other questions now. We've heard the word nuisance property come up a couple of different times. So I'd love if we could have our code compliance supervisor, John Berglund, and maybe Sandra Yanis, our deputy city attorney, talk a little bit about nuisance properties. The question specifically is that several houses on 10th are known nuisance properties. How does the city monitor that, and what more could be done?
There are two properties in the 1100 block of 10th Street that were in a nuisance abatement enforcement process. The properties in the city are monitored by reports generated through certain programs that we have to identify properties that have repeat violations. And on the Hill, there are certainly many properties that populate on those reports. The city focuses resources on the properties with the most egregious violations first, and pursues escalation and nuisance abatement in those circumstances as a priority. Following this incident, there are many properties, in addition to the two that already have been introduced to the nuisance abatement process, that are being considered for additional enforcement action pending the results of police investigations.
I'll just add that we have filed, I believe, around 22 cases already in the with nuisance abatement action. There's different phases to the nuisance abatement process. The first process is a notice to the property owner, and as I mentioned, we have around 22 that have already been issued those notices. We've had 2 go to second phase, which is when we have a settlement meeting that's required under the ordinance, where the property owners, tenants, and all relevant parties have to get together and come up with a plan to have an agreement as to certain conditions that will prevent future public nuisances. And we had 2 successful, as I mentioned, settlement agreements recently. We had participation from the University Hill Neighborhood Association, which I think is really important to get that feedback from the community as to, you know, how this is affecting them, and And also, I think it's been an invaluable experience to have that feedback because it provides that different perspective. So as John mentioned, we're waiting to hear for confirmation regarding which properties were involved on Saturday's incident. And once we do that, we can follow up and make decisions about pursuing nuisance abatement. On the 3 properties that are already in the process, we would escalate those properties and whether or not there would be additional properties to be considered to begin the process of nuisance abatement on those as well.
Thank you, John and Sandra. Devin and probably Jeff as well, this may be for both of you. Devin, you talked about how potential, make sure I see Devin coming up. You talked about how consequences could lead all the way up to expulsion for students. Is there a mechanism for expelled students to also be removed from their off-campus housing, or what would that look like from a neighborhood perspective?
Yeah, Jeff, do you want to take that or do you want me to?
Sure, I can answer the last piece there. I mean, at the end of the day, when looking at off-campus leases and off-campus student properties, it's the easiest way to look at it is that it is a completely separate entity to CU. So there really is no way that the institution will be able to force students out of their lease, as that's a legal binding contract directly with their private landlord and their private property owner. That being said, we do have really good relationships with property managers and with landlords up on the Hill. So when cases like this do arise, we were able to communicate with those landlords and property managers to also fill them in on what is kind of going on in order for them to take their own steps. So CU cannot force the hand of those landlords and property managers, but we can certainly assist to have the landlords and property managers be made aware of the circumstances that their student tenants are kind of bringing to their property.
And what I will add to that is when a student is found in violation of a public health order, federal law does allow us, after the finding of responsibility, to notify that student's emergency contacts, which is often their parents. And we do indeed send that notification. And when the parents or emergency contacts or guardians get involved, that also generally helps in those types of situations.
Great, thank you. And thank you for someone who asked a question. I forgot to circle back to recognize that we've been joined by Mark Stein. Mark is the local president, maybe. He'll give us his exact title of IFC on the Hill. That's Interfraternity Council on the Hill. So what many folks may not realize is some of our fraternities at CU are not necessarily affiliated with the university, but they are affiliated with the National Interfraternity Council organization. And so Mark is their local contact for that. Mark, if you wanted to pop your camera on, and if you wanted to give any type of statement today, or just pop your camera on and wave so that folks know who you are. Oh, or maybe when you have a chance to pop your camera on, please do so. But Mark is with us and may be able to answer questions should any come up in that topic. So this is more of a broad question for any of our panelists on the call today. Many of the neighbors, both in the submitted questions earlier today and in the question and answer box, are really interested in taking more of a long view on living conditions on the Hill. Response is one thing, and response is always appreciated, but this is also being seen as really a symptom of an overall problem that has existed for many years on the Hill. So I wonder if each of the folks that we have with us, each of the organizations represented tonight, could talk a little bit about what your long-term view and ideas are about how we can have more effective outcomes for quality of life issues on the Hill. Rachel and Mark, I saw your cameras come on first. So I'm going to turn to the two of you and see if you'd like to speak from the City Council perspective first.
Sure. So I will speak more to what the city, I think, could do. Obviously, we have a lot of stakeholders on this call, and there are things that CU can do. There are things that the landlords can do. There are things that the students can do. But what can the city do? And as part of the ongoing work for this Hill Revitalization Working Group, we talk a lot about what can we do that will make the quality of life there better. And so I'm hoping that this can be a catalyst for implementing some of the changes that we're looking at. And those are tweaking ordinances. So how do you make it more easy or more viable for people to file complaints, say on the front end of a party? So a lot of times neighbors, for example, won't want to call something in because they won't want to be retaliated against. And so then you will only call in if it's really worth it. And when it's worth it, you've already got a couple hundred people out there, right? So what can we do to make it easier and safer for people to call in violations when the police response can be an easier lift? So things like that for ordinances, and then enforcement. Some of that could come down to ordinances, and some of that may come down to finances, money, reapportioning some of our resources to better enforcement on the Hill. So those are the two things that I think that the city can be looking hard at. And also with ordinances, I think that there may be some tie-ins to landlords there as well. So that's what I'll say for now.
Thank you, Rachel. Mark, anything to add to that?
Well, first, to agree with everything that Rachel said. And there are a number of areas in which we can begin to explore ways of dealing with this problem. I don't speak for council, I just speak for myself. I would like to increase landlord responsibility for the conduct of their tenants. And that goes in two categories. One is simple litter and nuisance behaviors like that. And the other is, the larger behaviors that we saw this past weekend. I think landlords have to learn to be a little bit more responsible in who they're populating their buildings with and what assurances they're getting from them in terms of behavior. And they have a bigger role to play here than we have expected of them previously. That would be my personal area that I'd like to explore. Whether the council will want to do that, well, we'll have a conversation. But there are all kinds of areas in which we can have a productive conversation about better enforcements of existing codes, better codes themselves, and other techniques to make this neighborhood safer for everyone, students and residents, because residents do have a right to quiet enjoyment of their homes, and that was not the case this weekend by any means. So we will be having robust conversations at the council level on all of this, and I look forward to that.
Amalia and Chief Harold, I'm coming to you next. I do want to see if Lisa Nelson, our neighborhood representative, has anything to add to how I framed this topic.
Thanks, Brenda. And yeah, so again, to our council representatives on the call, I'm really glad that you're here, and I'm glad you're engaged, and I'm glad that you're really taking a hard look at our ordinances. I think I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of the neighbors who are on this call right now, that there's just a massive disconnect between what neighbors experience on a day-to-day level every day living on the Hill. It's not just Saturday, it's not just when there's 500 people, it's every day, it's every night, and it's noise and it's parties, and you call the police and you call the police and you call the police, and nothing ever happens. That's the lived experience of the neighbors on this call, and that's why you have 130 people on this call, right? We call and we call, we do all the things that we are asked to do for years, and everything keeps happening exactly the same way. The students are left with the realistic perception that there's never a consequence to what they do, because they never actually receive any consequences from what they do, because our system is broken. So I do think starting at the top with the ordinances is important, but I think there is really critical that within the city that there's communication between council and police department and city attorney's office and code enforcement and the, you know, what's happening, what's actually happening. Everyone's working real hard at their job, but it's not actually solving the problems that are happening in the neighborhood. And I just want to give a shout out to Beth Christensen, because she's undertaking this huge project to make data accessible to the public. And I think once everyone gets a chance to see the data of what actually people are reporting from the neighborhood, then I think that it will paint a much more clear picture of the gap between what people experience every day living here and what the response from the city has been. So I know in a way you might not even be able to respond to that because you might not have that information yet, but I want to really speak on behalf of all of my neighbors that is what needs to happen, because right now it's not happening. And when it's not happening, the students legitimately think that they can do anything that they want whenever they want. And again, not all the students, but the kind of students that participated on Saturday. I heard during the riot where they were throwing objects at the police, there were students chanting, "Get out of our neighborhood." They think it's their neighborhood. They have no sense of living in a larger community, and no one is providing them any guardrails or boundaries around that. And so that is what a lot of these questions in the chat are about. And I just wanted to share that perspective to inform the rest of this conversation tonight, because I think there's some frustration out there.
Brenda, can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
We acknowledge that frustration. We hear you. We're trying to address it. That's why we're here tonight. There's no lack of understanding as to what kinds of pressures you've been under, and we want to try to address it.
And I'd like to piggyback on that too, that Lisa and I have been talking for a while, and somebody earlier said this is a symptom of the issue, not the entire issue. The riot is not the entirety of why we're having this discussion. And so I just want to support that. I know that COVID has greatly exacerbated what you all were going through on the Hill, but these conversations predated COVID as well.
And Brenda, if I could jump in there, Lisa's absolutely correct. This is a daily issue for the Hill community members, and Rachel and I started a conversation the last time we met, and so I think there's some lifts that we can do, and Councilman Wallach's comments are really important to me, because I see this as that we can clearly identify egregious place management issues, and there has to be consequences that are swift. And I know that we're all working harder on those issues, but I think that we can really take a look at that and see if we can't bolster and strengthen that. Because at the end of the day, unfortunately, we will not be able to enforce our way out, but what we can start doing is preventing these things from happening in the first place. So I completely support what the councilman's comments were.
Thank you. And I know, Amalia, you've been patiently waiting. So I'll turn it to you.
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to comment as well. I've been lucky enough to be a part of these conversations and of these working groups for the past 3 years, even prior to my role as president, but when I was still actively involved in student government. And a discussion that we've specifically been having this year, kind of on my way out and getting ready for the next year's term, is that there needs to be some type of long-term concrete solution to address these issues, because we have the same conversations every single year about the same issues that are being faced every single year. And that's something that I've identified also in looking through the chats and seeing what neighbors are saying that I don't get to interact with it as often as I do the neighbors in this group. But I think that that's important to mention too, that it must include the relevant stakeholders at the table, because other college towns do exist, and other college towns have had issues as well in addressing town and gown relationships. And so we want to be able to kind of look towards those other college towns and see what they're doing there, what they're getting right, and how we can maybe mirror some of those solutions. But I always do want to emphasize two things as well when we're talking about students on the Hill. First, it's always going to be important for the university, as it is institution for education, to be promoting education to students as to things ranging from what the city ordinances are, what is expected from students, what you can expect if enforcement occurs, and things like that. But additionally, to always kind of acknowledge that there is a reason that students, other than the partying, that students want to come to the Hill. It's a conveniently placed neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that's super rich in culture and history and businesses and opportunities and social networking opportunities and everything in that light as well. And so students have and will, those especially that are compliant with ordinances and that do follow the rules, play a really pivotal part to the community and to the businesses and to the city. And so I do really want to commend those students and their compliance, and additionally commend the students who have been really fundamental in the reporting that has occurred as a result of this weekend, and the willingness of a lot of students to kind of bypass what they may be afraid of in reporting or backlash or retaliation, but rather being compliant with the university and the police forces as well.
Thank you, Amalia. Appreciate that. Devin, and maybe this is for Devin and John also. I know that this period of time, one of the opportunities that has arisen is the opportunity to create some better communication between code enforcement, law enforcement, and student conduct. So maybe you can talk about some of the pathways that exist now that maybe didn't exist before COVID that can continue to help improve this situation going forward.
Yeah, I'd be happy. John, do you want to take us? Do you want to start with that, or do you want me to?
I can get us started. There has definitely been an increase in communication with city partners, including CU, including weekly meetings to discuss what each party is working on, to share information, to share notes on specific details, addresses, names, who's doing what, how we can support each other in those efforts. So in general, the networking that's occurred, the lines of communication that have been created and that continue to be utilized, database depositories, all of those things have been established over the last year and continue to be utilized and continue to be essential to our response to situations, including this one. And so I just thank all our partners, including everything CU has done to support these efforts.
Thanks, John. And just to add to that a little bit, you know, it's been wonderful to start partnering with Boulder County Public Health, as well as, you know, we've had relationships with Judge Cook and with the city for quite some time. I apologize. My dog is barking. But increasing our relationships with the city and with BPD has made our response significantly faster. For example, Boulder Police has been providing student conduct conflict resolution reports every Monday for various nuisance parties and other problematic events on the Hill, so that we can respond as quickly as possible and get exclusions in place for our students. And we're regularly communicating with the county and the city to be efficient and streamline all of our responses, and so that we know who's doing what and can really use all of the tools at our disposal to address the issues that are going on.
Brenda, you're muted.
I got tangled in my buttons. Thank you, Commander. I was coming to you next to see if you also wanted to speak to that same question. I know that you have also been developing some relationships and communication pathways that didn't exist before.
Yeah, I mean, we built on the already established relationship with student conduct. Having Boulder County Public Health involved has helped tremendously, along with our coordination with John Bergelin and his office. It is allowing us to take enforcement and holding people accountable beyond just the criminal elements of the crime and the civil penalties and the civil actions by a lot of these other agencies and groups has really helped us manage or try to manage some of the behavior on the Hill. Now, certainly what happened Saturday night is outrageous, but we hope that, especially going into this coming week and weekend, that we can take a slightly different approach and try to address some of these issues a little bit earlier and maintain our already good communication with our partners.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for sharing that. If anyone wants to share any other sort of longer term view strategies with the group, please let me know, and we're happy to return to that. There are a couple other specifics to the incident that happened that I want to make sure to get to, because we had several questions. Chiefs, I think this one might be for you. It's about fireworks, which has been an ongoing issue on the Hill, not just this past weekend, but we've heard a lot about illegal fireworks. And so I'd love to hear you speak a little bit on that.
Yeah, Brenda, thanks for the question. We started receiving fireworks complaints a little bit later in the evening from my computer-aided dispatch notes approximately after 6 p.m. And these weren't normal fireworks. These were commercial grade fireworks that can cause damage, injuries. So this escalated in our mind what we were dealing with. And unfortunately, these commercial grade fireworks are not unusual for this University Hill setting, and it really escalates, the response and the potential harm to the community. And so we did receive approximately 3 calls for service based on that. And I know I have Deputy Chief Weinheimer, who's got a lot more experience with these fireworks than I do, but we literally receive any given year hundreds of these calls from this area. Carrie, I don't know if you have anything further to add on that.
I'll just add that we know that those calls are a major issue for quality of life on the Hill. They're also particularly challenging to enforce because we get a call, we respond there, and by the time we get an officer in the area, it's gone quiet, they've moved. So they're very difficult to pinpoint people who are shooting them off. Unfortunately, last Saturday was an exception because we knew exactly where they were, but they're also in the middle of a crowd of 500-600 people. So we acknowledge that it's an issue. We certainly want people to continue calling. Just know that it's a difficult thing for us to enforce. And sometimes we get lucky and catch people, but more often than not, we don't.
Thank you. Yeah, Lisa.
Again, speaking on behalf of all of us who have been awakened this entire year by the commercial grade fireworks right outside of our houses, which is just a horrible, horrible experience, as you might imagine. Has the city looked at any other kinds of solutions around technology or other kinds of techniques that would enable them to become more effective at locating the source of the loud noises? Because this isn't just a huge health and welfare issue for the people that live here, but obviously it's a fire issue too. And it's the thing that makes people just not even be able to function because of the trauma and not sleeping. So I'm curious if the city has considered looking at some other ways of getting at this problem.
Lisa, I can just tell you from my perspective, I'm willing to look at anything that would help us pinpoint if there's technology. I know that I've spoken to the fire chief about this. Obviously, this is a huge fire concern, especially in Boulder, in this part of the country. We were trying to gear up for later in the year when we start to see the explosion of these calls for service, not only in the Hill, but across the county. So I don't know if Carrie has any technology. If you have any, I'm more than willing to look and take a look at that. Our drone program gets up and running. We have drones, but that's ineffectual as well most of the time. Carrie, do you have it? Or Carrie Yamaguchi, do you have anything further on that?
Some larger jurisdictions, Chief, have that spot shotter technology that can locate gunshots. I don't know if that can also be used for something like fireworks. Also, what kind of complicates that is I don't know if it's going to detect where that firework actually explodes or where it's launched from, right? Because we want to know where it's launched from. As Deputy Chief Weinheimer pointed out, these are very difficult issues to address because we pretty much have to see the firework launch. And so other than that, the gunshot detection systems, I'm not aware of any current technology for locating the origin of fireworks.
Lisa, do you have any ideas for us? So we'll most certainly explore them. I have, where I come from, we do have ShotSpotter. I don't think that would work here at all with fireworks. And ShotSpotter's very, very expensive to purchase. But if anybody else has anything, I must certainly put the time into investigating that. Do you have something, Lisa?
No, I mean, I know that Denver has that same technology to identify gunshot location, but I don't know anything about it. But I would just say, I don't know. It's a huge issue that we have to all work together to figure out a solution to, because it can't go on like this.
So I will just like to add that a few years ago, we did change our ordinance so that it included possession of fireworks as a violation because, as has been mentioned, it's very difficult to catch somebody in the act. And so, that has been a change that hopefully has provided some flexibility to enforce, but it is still very difficult to do so because stuff happens at night and it's just really difficult unless we have like really hard information that leads to a particular person. It's very challenging to enforce.
A couple of questions and suggestions from the chat. Sandra, do you know what the fine is currently for illegal fireworks, either possession or use of?
So most of the offenses in the municipal court for general offenses is a maximum of $1,000 fine and up to 90 days jail.
Okay. Philip, did you want to add something to that?
Or both.
Or both. Thank you. A couple suggestions that are coming up in the chat is one is about fingerprints, about collecting the fireworks after they've been used, and as Sandra was just mentioning, maybe that could trace to possession. And then another is security cameras being installed in the neighborhood. So I know those probably each have pros and cons to them, those ideas, but I wanted to say them out loud as we see them in the chat. One more that's being shared is perhaps the university could inspire an engineering project to develop software or some type of technology that could help with that pinpointing if what's out on the market is not appropriate for Boulder. So thank you, folks who put those in the chat. I do want to, we just have about 8 minutes left, and there's an issue that I know comes up over and over on the Hill and has come up over and over in the chat. So I just want to say it and see who on the panel has some commentary there. Most of our enforcement mechanisms on the Hill require a phone call from a neighbor. Many of them require a name of a neighbor to be attached to that. And there is a lot of fatigue from the neighbors of having to call over and over and over. So I wonder if we could speak to what other alternatives might exist to the neighbors being the front line of enforcement on the Hill. So Rachel, your camera came on. I'd also love to hear if there are ideas out of the city attorney's office, and Chief and Mark, I see your cameras as well. So we'll start with Rachel.
I'm happy to wait and hear from city attorney's office first. They're closer to it than me.
That would be great. Sandra or Philip?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond. So, we have several different ordinances, code violations on our books. And while there are some that do require a complainant, I'm thinking specifically of disruption of quiet enjoyment, where it actually does require someone to report a complaint of them, being disrupted in their home. We also do have other noise violations that are available. And also, we have unreasonable noise from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. We've got exceeding decibel levels in residential areas for, 50 decibels between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. We've got nuisance party violations. So in most of these, if the officers can see the violation happening and they're there, then they don't need a respondent or a complainant to be included. It's helpful because it just corroborates what the officer maybe has seen. But really, in terms of having a complainant, the only code violation that I can think of that requires that person is disruption of quiet enjoyment.
Yeah, Lisa, would you care to add to how I frame this again, please?
I just want to respond to what Sandra shared, and that is that neighbors are specifically told that the ordinance that the police use to address noise in our neighborhood is disruption of quiet enjoyment. I have literally been in a room where police say they will not enforce the decibel level, and I've had many occasions where they also do not enforce unreasonable noise after 11 p.m. And that doesn't even get to the problem because unreasonable noise happens all the time. It happens at 8 in the morning. It happens at 11 in the morning. So I appreciate Sandra sharing what we have as ordinances. The whole point, I think a huge point of this entire conversation is that our ordinances are not effective. A huge amount of time and effort goes forth, especially on the part of community members, but they aren't effective. They're not solving the problem. And so I just want to make sure that everybody hears that. And Devin might have something to say about it, but I also think Rachel has something to say about it.
Just jump in real quick. Thanks for that, Lisa. That I think a goal would be to make it as easy as possible for the neighbors to make valid complaints because they're already shouldering a lot of the burden of lifting the information up to us. So I don't know that there's an easy online like Inquire Boulder type space where you can anonymously say, I'm in my house and I can hear a party a block away. I can't give you the address. I can tell you it's here and I'm not going to give you my name. And that would encourage people to safely do it in a way where they're not worried about their tires getting slashed for being the ones to report it. So I do think we need to be sensitive, and it's an area that we can shore up in keeping, at least with that zone of the community where I think that the statistics are going to show we have a super high volume of noise during the day where we need some help to prevent parties from escalating and to improve day-to-day quality of life. So I'm sensitive to what Lisa's saying, and I think that there are some not too burdensome code fixes that we could implement to address them.
Yeah, if I could just add, Rachel, I'd love to have Carrie Yamaguchi kind of walk you through so everybody's on the same page, because I do think this is an area that we can improve on. But Carrie, if you'd kind of walk through why we do what we do and the enforcement that we take and how challenging it is to establish probable cause on some of these other ordinances. So please.
Yeah, so the ticket that our officers try to write most often is the nuisance party. And because of the pandemic, that ticket is much easier to write today because the emergency adherence to emergency orders or having a group at your home that's larger than public health allows is the basis for the nuisance party, in addition to noise or underage drinking, things like that. And so the number of tickets that we've written per incident has gone up because we're able to write that ticket and we don't need a complainant on that charge for those charges. The disrupting quiet enjoyment of home, we don't have a choice, but we must have a complainant to write that ticket. But I would say that right now it's easier for us to write a ticket because of the public health orders that are in place. Some of the things that we have looked at to try to streamline the quiet enjoyment enforcement includes sending letters to the residents of particular addresses to effectively warn all of them. I have an unfinished message to Sandra asking to discuss a slight ordinance change in there to make that just a little bit more effective. But if we can get that going, then as soon as we give the warning to an address, we would be able to follow up with a letter. And what I'm hoping is to tweak the ordinance so that we can actually just present the letter during the warning to effectively warn everybody in that residence. Now, if we have to go back to that residence for a similar complaint, we're still going to, by ordinance, we still need a complainant, but we don't have to play this game of pick a roommate to see who's going to answer the door. We can write anybody who answers the door who lives there. So yes, it is difficult. The decibel readers, the department has a very limited supply of those. I think we have 2, and I think only one, last time I checked, only one of them is certified. And then we have to get training on that as well in order for all of that to be shored up for prosecution. So it's a difficult ticket to write. We usually use those for commercial violations when we have a bar or a restaurant that we get complaints from regarding noise enforcement. I don't know if that helps.
Yep.
I would just like to add that there are some cases where people don't file reports with police, but they do file reports with the university or through other sources, such as boulder-neighbors.com, through off-campus housing, neighborhood relations, et cetera. We have a team of folks that are looking at all of those reports. When we have enough information to take conduct action, which is not common, but when we do, we are taking action through a student conduct process. And when we don't have enough information, we have several other outreach mechanisms and educational mechanisms that we use. Students at a state institution are entitled to due process. So taking formal action in those cases can be difficult, and it's not enough for us just to ignore those cases. We are very focused on having meetings with the students in those residents, having some of our student leaders go and do door knocks on those residents and trying to engage in education. And while I understand that that's maybe not as satisfying as other resolutions, it is a tool that we are utilizing that we found to be effective in many of our situations.
Thank you, Devin. I want to acknowledge that there's a lot of frustration in the chat, and that this is a huge conversation that we're attempting to have tonight. I think the conversation in response to the egregious incident that happened over the weekend is a huge topic. And I think that it being a symptom to the larger problem is obviously a 20-year topic that we have been addressing, coming at in conversation from many angles for many years. We are at 7 o'clock, and I'm not going to be able to help us get through that frustration tonight, and I want to acknowledge that and apologize. What I am hearing as your neighborhood liaison is that there is a need for more conversations like this in a wider spread way than we do them now. Our Hill Revitalization Working Group meets monthly and has some great in-depth conversations, and many of the things you've heard tonight are the result of the way that group works together. But that doesn't provide an outlet for all of you. So as the neighborhood liaison for the city, I am hearing that and considering how best we can make more space for more people to be heard in this conversation. One thing I'd like to do now to sort of head us toward closing this evening is I would love to throw open to everyone on the panel, and am hopeful that that most of you will want to answer. Just one thought or idea that you have that can help us get to better quality of life outcomes on the Hill. I think we spend a lot of time talking about what we do now, and we do a lot. And I think it would be great to hear what thoughts each of you have for how it could be done differently with some better outcomes. So we only have a few minutes, so maybe it's just a short sentence each. But if those of you are ready, could pop on your cameras. I'll just go through the list. I also want to acknowledge we've been joined by JB Banks, who is the Associate Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs. Correct me if I have your title wrong.
It's actually acting Vice Chancellor now.
Acting Vice Chancellor. I saw that online and thought, that's not right. But JB will correct me.
Thank you very much. I would like to jump in for some remarks. Thank you for allowing me to join. I know that this is not a comfortable situation to be in. I recognize that. And I've certainly been in conversations with you, Brenda and Lisa, and some others about some of these things. Molly and I have been having a number of conversations. One thing that I will say that I do believe that it's time for us to have some concrete protocols or a plan in writing that we can begin to benchmark our progress. And I know very much that we're in a reactive state, whether we get a phone call or there's someone who's gotten in some trouble. But we need to think about how we onboard students into the community. I think that we need to be thinking about when we recruit students, what we're telling them around expectations, not just on campus, but in the community as well. I also very much think that we need to be really pushing our fraternity and sorority members in that community to be stronger influencers in a positive way. Not that I'm indicting them at all, but oftentimes they are thrown into the subject line as being problematic. So I think we got to figure out how we could mobilize our influencers so that we don't have these kind of circumstances come up. But the other piece I would like to mention again and reiterate that we need to find a way for benchmarking. How are we progressing? Where are we headed? What are our long-term goals? I recognize that this is a 20+ year issue. This just did not happen out of the blue. This is something that has been occurring for years on the Hill. It is a culture. Students come here, to hang out on the Hill and to do some of the things that they do. And so I really want to be able to bring them into the conversation more deeply, certainly to touch base with the influencers so that we can figure this out. I am not happy about this circumstance. It is not okay with me. I have been barking since I've gotten here that we got to figure this out and get this right. And you have our commitment to help in that way. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, JB. We appreciate you joining us. I'm going to start then with next with Kim Calomino, who we've not yet gotten to hear from.
Thanks, Brenda. So I'm in the position of having a great fondness and many great relationships with our friends on the Hill and feel deeply their angst, their anger, their frustration. And I also have great admiration for the CU team who works day in and day out and sometimes overnight to help students and community members alike deal with the situations that arise on the Hill. And I just thank everybody for coming forward with their frustrations and their concerns and their anger and their tears, as well as how we might work together to move forward. There are solutions out there and we need to work together to find them. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Kim. Amalia.
JB took every single one of my talking points, I guess. But just to reiterate, I really do think that it's important that we have that long-term, sustainable, legitimate in writing plan moving forward. And that also, I mean, I know that we have conversations a lot about the difficulties of the student overturn on the Hill, but maybe looking forward to not taking advantage of it, but realizing that with new generations of students coming in, that is a possible new generation for kind of re-education and education, and also re-collaboration with students and residents of the Hill, so that we're kind of able to move forward and instill those new values among students. And I would also definitely like to second the fraternity and sorority life relations moving forward as well. That's extremely important. And as someone who is a part of a sorority, I see a lot of value in how quickly we can mobilize to kind of like respond to issues. And I've been pretty proud to see our Greek community condemning a lot of the actions that occurred this weekend as well.
Thank you, Amalia. Philip.
Thank you. I think one of the positives that have worked is that the various organizations, the university, the city, police departments are from both of those entities, public health, city attorney's office, district attorney's office, are all now coordinating their efforts to best find the solutions that we can and implement those strongly. That continued interaction and that continued cooperation is going to be a very strong pillar in moving forward.
Thank you. And I again want to invite our other panelists. If you have closing words for a brighter future you'd like to share with the group, please do go ahead and turn on your camera so I know that you are looking to speak. I will go to Sandra next.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. I guess I just want to reiterate what some people have already mentioned, which is that we are 100% on board to try and work on these issues. I have been around for quite a long time. I've known Lisa for a long time, and my heart goes out to you, Lisa, and on all the other folks who have to endure this situation. And it would give me so much pleasure to try to solve this issue in my lifetime. And so if there are things that can be changed in terms of the law and the ordinances that we have on the books, we're more than open to those suggestions and ideas. I think that, you know, staff takes direction from council, council sets the policy, and we take direction in terms of what needs to be done. And so we are available and open to suggestions and ideas moving forward and trying to find some solutions.
Thank you. I'm coming next to our chiefs. Chief Jokerst.
Yes, thank you again for having us. And I just want to say if there's anything on behalf of our police department that we can do to better support our community constituents, the city of Boulder, our students, our faculty and staff, and everyone that comprises this beautiful city, we are partners, we are collaborators. We will come to the table with any of those meetings should they come up. If anyone has any direct questions for me or my police department, please feel free to reach out and I will answer those. But just know that we are willing participants and will come to the table to make sure that we have a very safe and beautiful community here in Boulder. And Chief Maris, did you want to add to that?
The only thing I'll say is Dorian and I have been working with the commanders. You'll see an aggressive deployment strategy for the next couple weeks, and we have reinforcements from our staffing, and there will not be much tolerance for bad behavior on the Hill. And obviously, I will be a good partner moving forward and to start looking at some of these solutions that I think would have an impact on the quality of life for the Hill residents. And again, from the bottom of my heart, I'm really sorry this incident happened. And you can expect enforcement and arrests forthcoming.
Thank you for that addition, Maris.
Thank you, Chiefs. I want to give some voice space to our interim city manager, Chris Meschuk.
Thanks, Brenda. And again, thank you everyone for attending this evening. And I have to echo much of what folks have shared here at the end of the conversation in terms of the desire to really start to find solutions that are going to work. And I think as Sandra shared, for many of us that get involved in working in local government, we do it because we want to make life better in the communities that we serve, and we want to solve problems. I think what we're hearing tonight is a desire from many to start to solve problems. And I think that's going to be a combination of both ordinances and regulations. It's going to be a combination of practices, and it's going to be, I think, partnership. And as I think JB was the one that shared, and I've echoed this in the last 48 hours or so with many people, that the partnership that the university, the city, and Boulder County Public Health have experienced through this pandemic, I think we can use that partnership and that ability to collaborate in a way to now leverage beyond the pandemic into problem solving in our community. So I look forward to the opportunity for all of us to be able to work together to do that.
Thank you, Chris. Lisa, and then we'll close with our council members tonight.
Thanks, Brenda. To all my neighbors on this call, I just want to say I hope that I've represented your concerns well. I know everyone's tired and frustrated and angry, and I am too, which you probably can tell. And I know there's a lot of really great questions that came in that were real specific that folks didn't get an answer to. And so one idea I've had is like, let's try to figure out a mechanism where folks can get information about the things that they want to understand. I think that would help people feel better. Obviously, it's, you know, the short term has been traumatizing, the long term has been traumatizing. I think it's going to take a while for folks to feel better. And I think it's just a balance because people are tired of talking about it and they want the action. They want action and they want results, and they don't want to have any more dialogue around it, right? I also want to just acknowledge to all the partners who are panelists on this that in the many years that I have been working on these issues, we've never had this kind of engagement and representation from every stakeholder that we need to actually make these changes. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful for all the people that have dedicated themselves to listening to us finally and to trying to come up with solutions. So I'm just as frustrated as everyone is that we don't have specific actions that we're talking about right now this minute. And I want to really acknowledge that I think people are frustrated and maybe don't feel good about where we are right now. And neither do I, but I'm hoping that we can leverage all these relationships and the people that are finally at the table to actually do the action that we need as soon as possible. And so I just want to thank everybody who's here and recognize that hasn't always been the case. So.
Thank you, Lisa. I echo that appreciation. I also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of great ideas coming in through the Q&A, and make a commitment to work with my partners on the communication team to figure out a mechanism by which to answer questions that have come in tonight in a frequently asked question document to post on the webpage where we're tracking the responses to this incident. We'll also let you know where this recording can be found. There are daily updates being posted. And Dion, our public information officer for the police department, will put that in the chat so that you can find that. I've just asked everyone to turn their cameras on as we close out, just so you can all remember who was with us on the call today. As Lisa said, it's formidable that we have all of these partners able to come together at essentially a 24-hour notice for this meeting. And I thank each and every one of you for the time that you spent tonight. I again think we could go on for another 2 hours, but as response, it requires a lot, and we are still very much in the middle of it. I don't want to require too much more of everyone's time this evening so that they can get back to the other work they're doing in response to this incident. But we will capture the ideas that you have shared in the Q&A tonight. We appreciate all of the energy that you have brought. I know this format is frustrating, and appreciate your patience as we tried to navigate the best platform to have this extensive and difficult conversation on tonight. And so with that, I will turn to Mark and to Rachel for their final remarks this evening.
Well, first, thanks, Brenda, for moderating this conversation and for everybody who attended. I think it was very useful. My final comments are that this is not really rocket science. There are a number of suggestions that people have made that we can begin to analyze and get into place and act affirmatively to make the Hill a better living experience for everyone. I know it's a problem of 30 years duration, but that is not an excuse for not acting swiftly and affirmatively today. What happened this weekend was simply an unacceptable incident. And I think I hear the anger of everyone from the Hill. I share it. And I think this council will take some affirmative steps to begin to address those problems. I certainly hope so. I will certainly advocate for that. And so I thank you again for attending tonight. It's not the most convenient time for everyone, but it's been, I think, a very productive conversation, and I hope it will lead to more productive conversations, and that will lead to affirmative practices and ordinances that will make this that will make your life a little bit better, hopefully a lot better. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And Rachel.
Thanks, Brenda. My comments would be pretty similar to Mark's. I think we need to bear in mind that we don't want to make perfect be the enemy of the good here. This is not the beginning of this conversation. This is like the tail end of the middle at best. We're decades in, so I think we need to get some of the easier lifts that we can do, which we've identified many over the course of just my last year and a half of involvement, up and over and enacted. And I think we can do that. And I hope that council will act quickly. I also just want to mention that I don't believe the city does. I don't see students as the enemy. They are a valued part of our community, and they also want a good quality of life. So I just want to mention that I value our students, and I want to thank everybody who's been here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. And again, thank you everyone on the panel, but more importantly for the over 100 people who joined us throughout the evening. We appreciate you. We appreciate your energy. We appreciate the voices that we saw in the chat tonight. And we thank you so much for continuing to hold us accountable and continuing to engage with us as we move forward, not just through this incident, but for the long term. So thank you everyone so much for being here, and we will be in touch when we have more to share. We also have looking in the chat, Dion, for the daily update website where people can go to get daily updates on this immediate response. But if we can't get it into the chat tonight, you will receive a follow-up communication from us that has that information in it as well. All right, thank you all for being here. Good night.